A house, abandoned, yet alive with secrets no one dares to speak. 3 friends thought it was just another dare, a simple thrill. But what waits behind the walls doesn't just watch. It chooses, it follows, and it remembers everything. Tonight, you will hear the story of what they found, of the shadows that moved, the whispers that spoke, and the mark left behind that changed their lives forever. Stay with me, listen closely, because some doors, once opened, can never be closed. A quiet countryside town in the American Midwest, where the nights stretch long and the air carries stories people no longer dare to tell out loud. Stories about land that remembers, homes that refuse to forget, and spirits who believe everything still belongs to them. This is the story of Evan, an 18-year-old kid who had no idea he was about to step into the middle of someone else's unfinished business. And it begins the day his aunt and uncle moved into the house on Willow Creek Road. Evan's Aunt Marlene and Uncle Ross had lived in Baton Rouge their entire lives. But after years of saving money, they decided to buy a bigger property further north. Something peaceful. Something with room to build a dream, as Uncle Ross always said. They found it in Willow Creek, a small, dusty town with miles of open farmland, abandoned barns, and a stretch of highway where no one drove after sunset. The house they bought sat on the edge of town, a 2-story farmhouse with pale blue shutters, a wraparound porch, and a large yard that seemed to breathe under the wind. To Evan, it looked perfect, quiet, safe, a place where nothing bad could possibly happen. But the townsfolk said otherwise. At the gas station, an old man folding newspapers warned them. That property's been empty for years. Folks who tried fixing it up never stayed long. He didn't explain why. He didn't have to. The way his voice trailed off was enough. But Aunt Marlene didn't believe in town gossip. She bought the property anyway, along with the abandoned lot next door, a place with a collapsed shack that locals refused to touch. Uncle Ross planned to tear it down and build a water bottling workshop. They moved in during the spring. Evan came along to help them settle and work part-time at the new workshop. Uncle Ross set him up in a small guest room near the back of the house, a room with one window facing the empty lot next door. The first month, quiet, uneventful, almost peaceful, until the nights began to change. Evan liked staying up late, playing games on his laptop until 2 or 3 in the morning. The rest of the house would be silent, Aunt Marlene asleep, Uncle Ross snoring, the workshop shut down. But sometimes, just past midnight, Evan noticed something strange. A shadow, a figure, walking past his door, always from the same direction, always moving toward the back of the house, and it never walked back. At first he thought it was Uncle Ross, but the footsteps were too slow, too heavy, too deliberate, and every time Evan checked, there was no one there, just the empty hall leading to the workshop, and the door that opened out to the abandoned lot they had torn down. Sometimes, nighttime in Willow Creek didn't feel like nighttime anywhere else. It wasn't just dark. It was the kind of dark that pressed against the walls, seeped under the door frames, and breathed quietly, as if something outside was trying to listen. Evan didn't notice it at first. Not really. Not until the 3rd or 4th, or maybe 10th time he saw the shadow drifting past his room. Always the same direction. always the same slow, dragging step. Towards the back door. Toward the lot where the old shack used to stand. One night, close to 2 a.m., Evan heard footsteps again. Heavy, uneven, almost like someone's boot heel was sinking into wet soil. He paused his game, turned his head, and there it was. A tall silhouette drifting past his doorframe. No features, just the outline of a man. Shoulders slumped, arms dangling, as if he were exhausted, or as if he'd been dead for a long time. Evan held his breath. The shadow didn't look at him, didn't stop, didn't change pace. It simply floated deeper into the house, toward the back exit. When Evan finally worked up the courage, he stood and followed. The hallway felt colder with each step. His skin prickled. His chest tightened. He could feel, not hear, but feel, the house settling in around him, like the walls were listening. He reached the back door. It was shut, locked. Still, there was no man. Only the chill. Only the silence. Only the faint smell of old soil. And something else he couldn't name. Evan walked back to his room, heart pounding, palms sweaty. He repeated to himself, "It's nothing. Just shadows. Just being paranoid in a new house." But deep down, a small, trembling part of him whispered, "Shadows don't walk with weight. Shadows don't drag their feet. Shadows don't breathe." The next morning, at breakfast, Evan casually asked, "Uncle Ross, were you up last night?" Ross looked up from his coffee. "Nope. Slept like a rock." "Why?" "No reason," Evan said quickly. But Aunt Marlene caught the flicker of fear in his eyes. "You okay, honey?" "Yeah, just tired." He lied, and he knew she knew. But nothing prepared him for what happened that afternoon. The day something touched him. While waiting for Uncle Ross to finish a phone call, Evan lay down on the old sofa in the workshop. The sun was hot. The air was heavy, and he drifted in and out of a half-sleep. That was when he felt it. A hand. Large. Calloused. Cold. It wrapped around his ankle. And then, Evan was dragged. Not pulled. Not nudged. Dragged. Across the floor. Past the open doorway. Toward the back lot. He couldn't scream. Couldn't move. His mind was awake, but his body felt pinned under a weight he couldn't see. The world blurred. The floor smeared with a long, wet streak, from where his heel had scraped along the concrete. Then suddenly, as quickly as it began, it stopped. Evan opened his eyes, and standing over him, blocking the light, was the shape of a man he had never seen in his life. Evan lay frozen on the concrete floor. His ankle still burned where the invisible grip had held him. His breath trembled in short, sharp bursts. And above him stood the man, or the shape of a man. The figure was tall, too tall, shoulders squared, chin tilted forward, as though he were examining Evan like a trespasser caught on his land. The workshop lights flickered. For a moment, Evan could see the man clearly. A worn flannel shirt, mud-stained jeans, boots caked with old, dried soil. But there was something horribly wrong. The man had no face. None. Just a smooth, pale surface where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. like his features had been erased. Evan choked out a sound, not quite a scream, more like his fear escaping through a crack in his chest. The faceless man leaned closer, 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 until Evan could feel cold air breathing against his skin. Then, the lights blew out. Darkness swallowed the room. Evan scrambled backward on shaking elbows, heart racing, but the floor felt wrong, damp, cold, almost like mud. He forced himself to whisper, "Who are you?" Silence. A long, stretching, suffocating silence. Then, from somewhere in that blackness, "Get out." Evan's blood went cold. He crawled toward the workshop door, hands slipping on the floor. The darkness behind him stirred, heavy, angry, alive. The moment his fingers touched the doorknob, something slammed into the floor behind him. He didn't look back. He bolted into the living room, chest heaving, slamming the door shut with all his strength. The house was quiet, too quiet, as if nothing had happened. Uncle Ross found him minutes later, pale, shaking, drenched in sweat. "What the hell happened to you?" Evan tried to speak, but the words came out broken, stuttering. I was dragged. Someone was in the workshop." Ross frowned. "You sure it wasn't a dream?" "Heat stroke." Evan shook his head violently. "I was awake. He pulled me. He touched me." Ross sighed, the kind of sigh adults use when they think you're making up ghost stories. "There's nobody out there. Doors are locked. Relax, kid." But Evan wasn't sure. Wasn't even close to sure. He walked with Ross back to the workshop, and there, on the concrete floor, was a long, wet smear. The exact path where Evan had been dragged. Ross stared at it, confused. "You spilled something?" he asked. Evan didn't answer, because he hadn't spilled anything. And the trail wasn't water. It smelled like earth. Wet earth. Old, cold, and freshly disturbed. That night, Evan lay awake, eyes open, breathing shallow, listening. And just after 1:47 a.m., the shadow walked past his door again. But this time, it stopped, right in front of his room. And something pressed a single finger against his doorframe. There are moments in life when the world feels wrong, when the air hangs heavy and time seems to freeze. This was one of those moments. Evan lay still on his bed, blanket clutched tight against his chest. The hallway outside was pitch black, and from behind the thin wooden door came the sound of a finger, a single finger, tracing slowly, deliberately, down the frame. Evan's breathing stopped. His heartbeat thudded against his ribs like it was trying to get out. He didn't move, not even a twitch, because something deep in his bones told him, if he made a sound, whatever was outside would open the door. The scraping paused. Silence. A silence so loud it felt alive. Evan forced himself to glance toward the gap under the door. Just a sliver. Just enough to see the hallway floor. And then, he saw it. A shadow, standing perfectly still, feet planted, facing his room, not moving, not breathing, just waiting. Evan's fingers dug into his mattress. "Please go away. Please go away. Please." Then, the figure turned. Not all at once. but in a slow, painful twist, as if its joints were stiff or broken. It walked away from the room, down the hall, past the laundry corner, toward the back exit of the house. Just like always, but this time, it stopped halfway, and Evan heard a voice, a faint whisper, dry, cracked, like it hadn't been used in years. "You took my home." Evan's mouth went dry. The shadow moved again, and this time, the back door opened by itself. A blast of cold, night air rushed into the house. Then the door slammed shut, hard. Everything fell silent. The next morning, when Uncle Ross came downstairs, he found the back door wide open. Not cracked, not unlocked. Wide open, swinging gently in the early wind. "Damn raccoons," he muttered. But Evan knew better. He stepped outside, following the line of dry dirt leading from the doorway, all the way to the empty lot where the old shack had been torn down. A place the townspeople warned them about. A place Ross refused to believe carried any meaning. A place where the ground looked freshly disturbed, as if something, or someone, had been pacing there all night. At dinner, Marlene noticed Evan pushing his food around. "You okay, sweetheart?" He opened his mouth, closed it, and whispered, "Aunt Marlene, I think something's angry with us." She gave a nervous chuckle. "Why would anyone be angry? We haven't done anything wrong." Evan looked out the window at the lot, at the dirt, the shadows, the silence that seemed to watch the house. He swallowed hard. "We tore down his home." Aunt Marlene froze, and for the first time, she didn't laugh. The next morning felt different, colder, quieter, as if the house itself had stayed awake all night, listening. Evan couldn't shake the voice he'd heard. "You took my home." Those words clung to him like a chill under the skin. Aunt Marlene cooked breakfast, but she barely touched her food. She kept glancing toward the back lot, the place that seemed to breathe whenever the wind shifted. Finally, she spoke. "Evan, what exactly did you see?" Evan hesitated. Aunt Marlene wasn't like Ross. She didn't laugh off strange things. She believed in signs, in intuition, in things people didn't talk about out loud. He whispered, "There's a man here, or something that used to be a man." Marlene's fork slipped from her fingers. But before she could ask more, Ross entered the kitchen, cheerful and oblivious. "Morning. Big day today. Gotta go into town, check on the shipment. You two wanna tag along?" They went. Not because Evan wanted to, but because staying in that house felt impossible. The drive into Willow Creek was quiet. Fields on both sides stretched endlessly, yellowed and forgotten. Barns leaned slightly, as if bowing under memories too heavy to hold. They stopped at a small hardware store. Dusty, old. The kind of place where nothing had changed in 30 years. Ross went inside to look for parts. Evan and Marlene waited on a wooden bench out front. That was when an older woman approached them. Thin, sunken eyes, face carved with a life full of stories. She glanced at Marlene. "You're the couple who bought the Henderly lot, ain't ya?" Marlene stiffened. "Yes." The woman exhaled, a long, tired breath. "You should have asked around before moving in." Evan leaned forward, heart pounding. Why? What happened there? The woman lowered her voice. Henderly didn't just own that house. She paused. He died there. Marlene swallowed. In the house? No, the woman said softly. In the shack beside it. Evan's skin crawled. The woman continued. Back then, people said he kept to himself, hunted in the woods, didn't bother nobody. But he was stubborn. The land was everything to him. When the county tried talking his property for a road project, he fought him till his last breath. Her voice trembled. One night, he disappeared. Folks searched for him, but the only thing they ever found. She looked directly at Evan. Was a trail, a long one, dragged through the dirt, straight into that old shack. Evan's breath caught. Marlene grabbed his hand. He was never seen again, the woman finished. But people say he didn't leave. Silence fell on the porch. Marlene whispered, "We tore that shack down." The woman's expression shifted, fear mixed with pity. "Honey, you didn't just tear down old wood." She leaned closer. "You tore down the only thing he had left tethering him to this side." Ross stepped out of the store at that moment, smiling like nothing was wrong. "You ready to head back?" Evan didn't answer, because he realized something terrifying. The shadow walking through the house, the finger at the door, the grip on his ankle. It wasn't random. It wasn't mindless. It was angry, and it was only the beginning. The ride back to the house felt wrong. Marlene didn't say a word. Evan stared out the window, watching the farmland blur by. And Ross, still clueless, hummed along to the radio like nothing in the world could possibly be amiss. But the moment the truck turned onto Willow Creek Road, Evan felt it. A shift in the air. A pressure. A heaviness. As if something in the dirt recognized him. As if it had been waiting. They parked beside the house. Everything looked normal at first glance. The porch, the workshop, the field behind the house. But the empty lot, the place where the shack had stood, it wasn't normal. Not today. The soil had sunk, just slightly, like something beneath it had shifted overnight. And on the surface, drag marks, not fresh, not old, but new enough that the dust hadn't blown over them yet. A straight trail, leading away from where the shack once stood, dragging, pulling, scraping. Evan felt the back of his neck tighten. Marlene whispered, "Do you see it too?" He nodded. Ross, however, squinted and shrugged. "Probably just rain washout." "There hasn't been rain in 2 weeks," Evan whispered. Ross didn't respond, because he didn't have an answer. Inside the house, everything felt colder. Not like an open window cold. Not like an air conditioner cold. A wrong cold. A cold that clung to you, sat on your chest, crawled into your bones. Evan walked toward his room. Halfway down the hall, he stopped. On the wooden floor, just inches from his doorframe, was a print. A deep one, too deep for any living person to make. A boot print, pressed into the wood, as if the foot that made it weighed more than any human body should. Evan knelt down, trembling, ran his fingers along the dent. Cold. Not icy, not winter, cold. grave, cold. Then, a second print appeared, right beside the first one. Not slowly, not forming over time. It just appeared, right in front of him, as if something had stepped forward from the air. Evan jerked back, slamming into the wall behind him. The hallway light flickered, once, twice. Then every bulb in the house burst at once. Darkness swallowed the hallway. Evan froze. He could hear something breathing, not near him, not far away, right beside his ear. Hot, wet, slow. Then a whisper, barely formed. Evan stumbled backward, scrambling blindly until he reached the living room. Marlene was there, pale and shaking. Ross came running from the kitchen, shouting, "What the hell happened?" Evan pointed down the hall, voice cracking. "He's in the house." Ross opened his mouth to argue, but then he saw it. The dark outline at the end of the hall, tall, still, staring without eyes. The shape didn't move, didn't breathe, just lifted one arm and pointed toward Evan, slowly, deliberately, as if choosing him. Evan's heart pounded so loud he was sure the dark shape could hear it. The outline didn't blink, didn't breathe. It just waited. Marlene grabbed his arm. "Evan, we need to get out," she whispered, her voice trembling like dry leaves. But the shape didn't move. Instead, the floor beneath Evan groaned, low, deep, like something enormous shifting underground. And then a sound came. "Evan, come back." The words were hollow, echoed from somewhere below the house, not through the walls, not the air, from the floor itself. Evan stumbled backward. What is that?" Ross stepped closer, flashlight trembling in his hands. "It's just the house settling, right?" he said. But even he didn't sound convinced. Another groan. The floorboards under the shape seemed to sink slightly, pressing the darkness into a more solid form. It was as if the house itself breathed. "The mark you took." The whisper came again, clearer, colder, angrier. Evan felt bile rise in his throat. The words weren't just coming from below. They were coming from inside him, pressing against his chest. Marlene tugged him toward the door. "We're leaving now." But as he turned, his eyes caught it. The living room rug had moved. Not fluttered, not slid. Moved like it was alive. Slowly, crawling, stretching toward the dark shape at the hall's end. Evan froze. Ross froze. Marlene whispered prayers under her breath. The shape lifted both arms, and the rug rose with it, folding like a dark, crawling tongue. "It belongs to me." The voice now shrieked, echoing like the house was hollowed inside. "Give it back, or you stay." The temperature dropped. Frost formed on the window panes. Steam came from their mouths with every panicked breath. Evan wanted to run. He wanted to scream. But his legs felt heavy, like stepping through water made of iron. Then, a single floorboard cracked. Sharp, loud, deadly. And from the crack, a dark tendril shot up, snaking across the wood like black smoke made solid. It reached for Evan's foot. He stumbled. Marlene grabbed him. "Run!" she screamed. But the tendril didn't stop. It curled around his ankle, gripping tighter, colder than ice, more solid than steel. Evan's mind screamed. Ross swung the flashlight like a weapon, but the beam passed through the shadow as if it weren't there. "You cannot hide from what you took." The voice, the house itself, echoed now, all around them. And then, silence. Only the whisper remained, faint, taunting. "I'll find you. I will find you." The three of them burst into the night. The moon was hidden behind clouds. The fields around the house stretched endlessly, dark and still. And from the house, the shadow waited, watching, choosing. They ran across the field behind the house, breath coming in ragged gasps. Evan's ankle throbbed where the shadow had grabbed him. Marlene's hand squeezed his, pulling him forward. Ross stumbled beside them, cursing under his breath. But the house didn't follow. Not yet. Up ahead, through the corn, a faint light flickered inside the old barn at the edge of the property. A lantern, or something else. Evan didn't care. Safety was light, even if it was a flickering shadow in the darkness. They reached the barn, pushing the heavy door open. It groaned, echoing like a scream. Inside, the air was thick. Dust motes danced in the lantern's glow. But something was wrong. The light didn't feel warm. It watched them, and then Evan noticed it. The walls of the barn were covered in marks, deep scratches, claw-like etchings, and in the center, a large circle burned into the dirt floor. A mark, ancient, deliberate. "Evan," Marlene whispered, "do you see this?" He nodded, heart pounding. The circle wasn't just a symbol. It was alive, pulsing, moving, like the heartbeat of the house itself had found a second home. A shadow shifted near the barn's rafters. Not human, not animal, a form without a shape. And in it, 2 points of light, like eyes, burning softly in the dark. "You brought it here," the voice hissed, low and hollow. "And now you cannot leave it." Evan swallowed. "Leave what?" he whispered. But the answer came in the form of movement. The dirt circle twisted, black smoke rising from it, reaching for the ceiling. The marks on the walls crawled like insects, twisting toward them. Ross yelped, "We need to get out. Now." Marlene grabbed his arm, shaking him. "The back door," she screamed. Evan hesitated. Something in that circle, something inside it, called to him. A memory, a promise, a demand. "Give it back." The voice reverberated through the barn, through the walls, through their skulls. "Give it back, or stay forever." And then, a lantern fell. The flame went out. And for a heartbeat, the barn was pitch black. When the light returned, the circle had shifted. A path of scorched dirt led directly toward the old back door. It was an invitation, or a trap. Evan took a trembling step forward. Marlene whispered, "We follow the light. We follow the path." Ross muttered curses, but they had no choice. Each step toward the door felt heavier, like gravity itself resisted them. And from the shadows, the voice came again. "I see you. I see you." Outside, the night waited, silent, empty, but the barn, alive, watching, hungry. They stepped out of the barn into the cornfield. The moonlight painted the stalks silver, but the shadows between them were thick, alive. Every step they took seemed louder than it should be. Every breath, heavier. Evan led the way, heart hammering. Marlene clutched his arm, whispering, "It followed us, didn't it?" Ross, trailing behind, muttered something about superstition before falling silent. Because the corn, it wasn't still. Evan froze. "Do you hear that?" he asked. The whispers weren't human, not words anyone had ever spoken, but the tones, soft, pleading, angry, hungry. "Give it back." The same voice from the house, the barn, now threading through the corn like a living thing. They followed the narrow dirt path that led through the field. It was the only way out. Yet every step forward felt like wading through molasses. The corn around them pressed closer, brushing against their shoulders, leaving scratches like fingernails. A shadow darted between the stalks. Fast, silent, watching. Marlene gasped, gripping Evan's arm tighter. "I told you, it didn't want to leave the house." Evan swallowed hard. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it wants something else. Ross stopped abruptly. "What the hell?" he started. Then the ground beneath them shifted. Small indentations appeared, dragging through the dirt. Not footprints. Too deep, too wide, and the whispering, closer. "Give it back. Give it back." Evan realized the voice wasn't just in the air. It was coming from the ground, from the soil itself. They stumbled into a clearing. A single, gnarled tree stood in the center, branches reaching like twisted fingers. At its base, something glimmered. A small object, half buried in the dirt. Evan's heart clenched. It was the same charm, the one he had picked up in the shack. The one they had accidentally taken from the soil. The whispers grew louder, angrier, urgent. Evan knelt, hands trembling, and touched it. The soil around the tree writhed, black and wet, like the land itself was alive. Marlene whispered, "Just put it back, Evan. That's all it wants." He hesitated. The air around them thickened. The shadows in the corn twisted closer, forming shapes, eyes, limbs, claws, stretching toward him. "Give it back." Evan stood, holding the charm above the ground. For a moment, everything paused, even the wind. Then, with a deep breath, he lowered it back into the soil. The whispers stopped. The corn relaxed. The shadows receded into the night. They didn't speak. They didn't move for a long, tense moment. Then Marlene whispered, "It's over. For now." Evan nodded, but his gut told him otherwise. Some things, once disturbed, never truly leave. They turned toward the house. The night air felt colder now, but the field behind them, quiet, too quiet. They returned to the house. Everything seemed unchanged. The porch sagged as before, the field stretched out quietly, innocent in moonlight. But the air inside carried a new weight. Evan led the way through the hallway. The floor creaked beneath their feet, whispering reminders of what had happened. "Do you think it's gone?" Marlene asked softly, clutching her coat. Evan didn't answer. He couldn't, because some part of him knew the house would never let them leave unmarked. They reached the living room. Ross flopped onto the couch, trying to break the tension with a laugh. "Guess we're not in any horror story, just your imagination, right? Evan didn't reply. He saw it then. A shadow, thinner than before, stretched along the wall. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. It waited. "Give it back." The whisper rose again. Closer. Inside their heads now. Evan understood. It was never just the charm, the shack, the soil. It was the house itself, the land, the cornfield. All of it was alive, bound by a curse too old to name. Suddenly, the lights flickered. A low moan reverberated through the walls. The air turned thick and heavy. And then, a figure appeared. Tall, thin, shaped from darkness itself. Eyes hollow, but somehow watching everything. It pointed at Evan, the same deliberate motion as before. Slow, calculated. "You took what was not yours," the voice hissed, deeper now, layered with countless others. "And now, you belong to Willow Creek." Marlene screamed. Ross tried to move, but his body froze. Evan felt a pressure in his chest, as if the floor itself tried to drag him in. He fought. He kicked. He pulled. And then, instinctively, he whispered the only words he could think of. "I give it back." The figure paused. The walls groaned. The shadows twisted. And slowly, it dissipated. The air lightened. The room felt still. But they knew it wasn't over. It never would be. They left Willow Creek Road at dawn. The fields stretched empty behind them. The house stood silent, waiting. Evan glanced back once. The windows seemed to watch him. And for a fleeting moment, he thought he saw a hand wave. Not in greeting, in warning. The curse of Willow Creek would always remain. And someday, it would call again.